This afternoon, like I mentioned before the break, we're going to be talking first about billing and access in Terra, and then we're going to move on to some hands-on work with workflows. And additionally, I've brought in some people who know a bit more about security, so if I wasn't able to answer your question earlier this morning, please ask it again, and maybe they'll have an answer for you. So just to remind you from William's talk this morning, Terra itself is free to use. All costs associated with Terra are from storage, compute, and data egress, all from Google. It's Google passing on, or it's us passing on the cost from Google to you, but we don't charge you to use the platform itself. So really quick, I just wanted to mention what those three types of costs are, in case you haven't heard those before. So storage encompasses when you create a file in the cloud or you upload a file to the cloud, keeping it stored for you. There's a small fee associated with that. Compute can mean either notebooks compute, like we did this morning, or running workflows, like we'll do this afternoon. And data egress, which also means downloading your files. If you ever need to download your data from the cloud, there's a small charge associated with that as well. So all of this comes into play through a Google billing account. Now, Terra connects a billing project, so those free credits projects you're a part of, or maybe the workshop-temp I added you to, are Terra billing projects, and they're all connected on the back end to a Google billing account. So essentially, you need a billing project in order to run cloned workspaces. So there are multiple ways you can get access to these billing projects. One, I just mentioned to you, where the owner adds you to a billing project. So I added some of you to the workshop-temp, but this could be maybe your PI has a billing project that they add you to, or something like that. At the bottom is another way you've already seen, which is the free credits billing projects. These are 300 credits that you get to use over 6 months. I think I talk about it a little bit more, so I won't go into too much detail. But the third way is to set up a Google billing account and then link it to your new Terra billing project. So in order to set up a Google billing account, you would create one using a credit card, or you can link it to a bank account. Also talk to your procurement office at the BroadE or whatever institute you're part of. I think everybody here is from BroadE though. So. Or you can set up that billing account through a third-party reseller. We use Onyx Networking for our free credits program, and in that way they allow us to use, I believe we get our funding through NIH for the free credits program, and that particular grant gives us funding, and we are able to funnel that funding into paying for free credits. But unfortunately, that's not a credit card or a bank account we can link to, so we needed that third party to help us with that. So if you are functioning under similar constraints where you have a grant funding coming in like that, they can help with those things. Now, the free credits trial, it begins once you click that Start Trial button or link in the top banner, and gives you $300 worth of credit to use on any of those three types of costs, so egress, compute, and storage. These credits are available for 60 days or $300, whichever one comes first. And you also get emails notifying you when you've used up 50%, 75%, and 90% of your credits, so that you have time to either create your own billing account so that you can migrate over to continue using Google Cloud on a different billing process, or you can download your files prior to your credits expiring so you don't lose that work. Managing your cost is always the thing that we get questions on. So these are three places you can see cost within Terra itself. The first is the notebook's runtime environment. So you saw this up in the corner of your screen. When a notebook is running, it gives you an estimate of how much it costs per hour that it's in use. So this particular cluster is currently running, and it's costing us 19 cents an hour. You see that price change both when a cluster is first starting up, it costs slightly more. I think this particular cluster was something like 22 cents an hour when it was first starting up. And then when it's paused, it's much cheaper. It's about 1 cent an hour. So there's that for you. A good way that notebooks manage or can help save you money is with auto pausing. So notebook runtime environments, when you're not using them, but you may have just left the page open, they will auto pause when you're not actively using them. And so basically, if you left your browser window open and went home for the weekend, after, I want to say it's 2 hours, but somebody correct me if I'm wrong, it will, of no activity, it will pause your cluster and turn it to that 1 cent an hour so that you're not paying the 19 cents an hour every hour. The other place you can get charged is when you run pipelines or workflows. So if you run any of our showcase workspaces that have pipelines in them, there are always these tables in the dashboard, which is that first section that you're presented with all the text. They have these tables in there that give you an estimate of how much they cost to run. So for this particular workflow, which you'll run later today, it's a cram-to-bam workflow, and it runs on a particular sample called NA12878 small. It's of a particular size, and it tells you it will take 7 minutes to run and cost us 2 cents. So these estimates can help give you an idea of, let's say I have a much larger file of 12 megabytes, it'll probably cost me 4 cents, or even further larger will cost you more. You can extrapolate. To that effect, you can also use Job Manager, which is found through the Job History tab. We will also look at that later, so you may not be familiar with this particular screenshot here, but you can use that to keep track of costs in your workspace. So if you are BroadE, which all of you are, after you run a workflow, I think it'll take a few hours to report back what that workflow actually costs to you. And that's just Google telling us how much it's charging you for that particular run of the workflow. So it'll pop up and tell you the total run cost for that run of workflows that you ran. So we recommend running a small set of samples first so that you can see how much your full cohort may cost. To that effect, I wanted to point out these really great articles in our knowledge base. You have access to these slides, so don't feel like you need to write these specific URLs down right now. But they're really great for understanding the costs and some sample use cases for it. All right, next I want to talk about permissions in Terra. So permissions are designed in such a way that they can be customized to your specific use case. So it's broken down per user and based on resources you're accessing. So for example, a user could have a certain permission on a billing project, but then a different permission on, say, a workspace. And those access permissions fall under these policies or roles. So as an example for what those are, we have owner, writer, and reader, which many of you may be familiar with that terminology, but I'm just going to run through it really quick. Owners of any particular resource can add or remove users to it, lock that particular resource, so a workspace, things like that. A writer can write to the metadata, so those data tables that you saw created. They can write method configurations, which we'll be using in a bit for our workflows. A reader can only view the metadata, the method configurations and stuff that a writer would be able to edit. And then we have three other little checkbox options that give you can compute, self-explanatory. Basically, you can share writer access with someone, and they might be able to edit your data table, but without can compute shared, they wouldn't be able to cost you any money. so they wouldn't be able to run notebooks or run workflows. So if you want to make sure nobody else is costing you money, that's a box you can check, or uncheck, I should say. Other two options are share writer and share reader, so the ability to further share your workspace or whatever resource you're working with, to give others write access or read access, or if you just want to be able to control that yourself, you can limit the number of people you share that with. All of these permissions that I just mentioned here, so these policies or roles, can be done by groups of people, or they can be shared individually per email address. So earlier today, I added some of you to a workshop-temp billing project by your email address, but you can also be added to a certain resource by a group. So user groups can essentially grant these roles en masse so that you can keep these permissions consistent. So maybe you'd make a group for your entire lab, and anytime your lab needed access to a workspace, you could add that group to give them writer permissions, for example. And then another thing to mention here is the authorization domain. So authorization domains function like a group, but they are more strict. So essentially, you can make an authorization domain that says, if you're not from my lab, you're not allowed to access this workspace. So I like to think of it like a bouncer checking your ID at the door. If you share a workspace with someone and basically you're giving them the address to the place you want them to come, they go to the workspace to try and enter, but the bouncer checks their ID and says, are you a member of the right group? Are you allowed to see this thing? If not, they're told, you can't view this workspace, here's how you can get access. Or if they are, then they're allowed in. Now, this is a simple example for just checking permissions. You want to keep something private within your lab, but this also can be used for example, TCGA data is protected by the dbGaP authorization domain, so you need to link your account to dbGaP in order to access any workspace with TCGA data. And in that way, we prevent you from accidentally sharing something that shouldn't be shared with someone. Does that make sense? Okay. So roles on a billing project are slightly different than the other roles that I just discussed. So owner is pretty similar. They have full access to add and remove users, or create workspaces, or create notebooks, do anything like that. But you can also add roles for just a workspace creator, just a notebook user, or just a batch compute user, which tailor specific aspects of cost those people can incur on your billing project. So to give an example here, we have user 1 here, who is a PI of a lab, and they go and create a billing project. So they are now the owner of a billing project. And let's say they have a postdoc in their lab, which is our user 2, and they want that postdoc to be able to create workspaces and stuff. So they give the workspace creator role to user 2. So now they have workspace creator access to that billing project. With their newfound workspace creator access, they go ahead and create this workspace resource. And since they created it, they're the owner of it. They're the owner of a workspace, but the workspace creator of a billing project. Now, user 2 shares with one of their colleagues the workspace. They want some help writing a pipeline maybe, and they give them writer access to it. So now user 3 has writer access to this workspace, but since they're not added to this billing project, they can't run anything. They can't compute. Another thing here to point out is user 4 over here. So let's say our postdoc, user 2, met user 4 at a conference, and this user 4 is a PI of their own lab, and they'd like to learn about whatever analysis they're doing in the workspace for their lab. So what they do, this PI user 4 creates a group, so they're the owner of this group, for their lab, and they add 2 of their colleagues in as users to this group. Then all user 4 has to do is go and ask user 2 to share this workspace with their lab group. So they go ahead and do that and give them read access. So now user 4, user 5, and user 6 have read access to this workspace. Now this is a complex example, but it's designed to show you that you can customize permissions as intricately as you need to for your case, so that you're not just giving everybody max level access and then suddenly someone incurs a ton of cost and they shouldn't have been able to, or they delete a workspace and they shouldn't have been able to. This allows you to really fine tune what you want people to be able to do. And with that, any questions? Yeah.
I have a comment regarding to the free credit. We've seen that when the free credit runs out, the account will get suspended, and you won't be able to log back in, but the workspace is still available. In that case, go into Google and then either provide a credit card number for that billing account, or changing your workspace to a different billing account, like the data is the way to go. Even initially when you set up the free account, you have the credit card number, it won't automatically kick in.
Okay. Yeah, so just to repeat what she said, when your free credits expire, you either need to go to that billing account in Google and plug in a credit card so you can continue to use it, or you can copy your existing workspace with all your data in it that's tied to that billing project, clone it to your new billing project, whatever you've created that you want to now charge it under, and in that way you can migrate your data and other things over so you can still access them. Great, thank you. Any other questions? I answered all your security questions? I'm surprised. Yeah?
Are the cost estimates for pipelines, is that just for the BroadE curated pipelines? Like if you make your own method, will you get a cost estimate?
Yeah, so those are just created by us for the pipelines we provide. You would need to find your own estimate if you created your own pipeline. That's why we recommend running on a sample, so maybe run on one sample and find out how much that costs before you run on 100 samples, because you'll be able to extrapolate.